Halloween night back when I was in 8th grade, I'm 27 now, my friend Kayla and I were giddy with excitement messing around and getting dressed up in our costumes. I'm not even going to say what we were for that Halloween. It's too cringy. Anyway, this night was a special night for us girls because this was going to be the last year for us to go trick-or-treating. We thought that once we became freshmen in high school, trick-or-treating would be too childish for the new cool high school students to be participating in, so we were going all out, especially with the amount of candy, grabbing pillowcases that we planned to fill entirely. We practically skipped out my front door ready to begin. In our opinion, the greatest night and holiday of the year. We didn't waste any time going door to door, street after street, that we didn't even realize that hours had passed. Back during this time, the trick-or-treating time was a hell of a lot longer than the 2 or 3 hours it is now. Back then it just ended when the kids decided to end it. I can remember one year my sister, Kayla, and I stayed out to almost 11 p.m. Most of the houses would have already stopped answering their doors, but there was always a few houses still willing to pass out candy. I didn't even think to look at the time until I noticed that there were less and less kids each street we came to. So when I looked at my phone, I said to Kayla, "Holy shit, it's 9:30. We should probably get back to my house. We can watch a movie and stuff ourselves with this," proudly lifting up my pillowcase that was at least more than halfway full. We slowly start walking back towards my house, and as we were passing each street, we noticed how eerily quiet it had gotten seemingly out of nowhere. People were turning off their porch lights, signaling they were not going to be passing out any more candy. Now, I was a paranoid person back then, and I'm still a paranoid person to this day, probably even more so now. So when I got that feeling, that chill that runs up your back and your shoulders tense up. Something is off, I thought to myself. I look side to side and get an urge to look behind me. I slowly turned my head around, looking over my shoulder, and what I saw nearly made me piss myself. About 4 houses down from us was Michael Myers, or someone dressed as Michael Myers, I should say, who was slowly walking behind us. But to me, at that time, it might as well be the real Michael Myers. He stopped, staring back at me, not moving any muscle, just staring. Now this would be creepy to anyone, but this was literally my worst fucking nightmare. My #1 childhood fear just so happens to be Michael Myers. A little backstory. When I was about 4, my mom was busy cleaning the kitchen as I sat in the living room playing with my toys with the TV going in the background. The creepy music had caught my attention, so I started glancing up at the movie while playing with my toys. I grew less and less interested in my toys and had my eyes glued to the TV, already starting to grow nervous and scared by just the music alone. You know the part in the movie where Michael Myers pops out of the closet, grabbing a hold of the victim and lifting him up in the air against the wall as his victim desperately tries to break free but is paralyzed with fear. And then Michael pulls back the knife and brutally stabs the guy to the wall, pinning him to the wall and in the air. Well, my 4-year-old self had never seen something so gruesome and altogether just absolutely terrifying. And at that age, I believed it was real. In my 4-year-old mind, this was really happening to someone. My eyes bulged out of my head, instantly breaking out into tears, literally screaming my head off. His mask, the brutality, seeing someone being stabbed in this heinous murder. It blew my mind, and all at once I felt so anxious, scared, sad, just panicking. My mom comes rushing over, frantically trying to figure out what's wrong, scooping me up in her arms, and I was still screaming and pointed at the TV. By then, the movie continued to the part where Michael Myers is dressed up with the sheet over his body, with the glasses on over the sheet that he stole off the body of the victim, obviously pretending to be the guy he just murdered. The sheet freaked me out even more than Michael's mask, watching the masked killer walking slowly closer and closer up behind the girl on the phone, and I clung to my mom, sobbing and burying my face into her shoulder. She looked over at the TV saying, "Oh my God, how the hell did this get on? It's okay, shh. It's okay, honey, you're okay," trying to soothe me as she turned the channel off. I cried for at least an hour or more, just absolutely traumatized. After that incident, I couldn't sleep at all, especially alone in my bed, and absolutely could not stand the dark. I knocked on my parents' bedroom door for months, begging them to let me sleep in their bed with them, or I swear. In my head, I was convinced he was going to come down the dark hallway, silently creeping into my room, and stab me in my sleep. I did not get over my fear of Michael Myers until I was in my early 20s, so being in 8th grade, walking down a dark street, no one around besides just Kay and I, and seeing my absolute worst fucking nightmare walking slowly behind us, I swear I thought I was going to pass out. I looked over at Kayla, my voice trembling, and whispered, "There is somebody following us. He's dressed as Michael Myers, about 4 houses down. Pick up the pace, but do not start running." Kayla turned, looking slightly over her shoulder, and snapped her head back forward. "What the hell? That's so creepy. Well, we got 2 blocks to go. We'll see if he follows us when we turn." I nod, a million thoughts going through my head. Maybe I'm overreacting. It is Halloween after all, but why is he alone? And to follow 2 young girls? When we get to my street, I glance behind me, and I swear my heart stopped in that moment. He wasn't behind us anymore. I panicked, darting my eyes all around me. "Oh my God, where did he go? He's gone!" Kayla turns around, stopping in her tracks, squinting her eyes trying to scan the area. "Maybe he turned down a different street. He probably wasn't even following us to begin with," she said, as she spun back around heading down the street again. And then I spotted him. He stepped out from behind a tree, but now he was only 2 houses away. He started walking towards us, gaining on us as I stood there, frozen in fear. I screamed, "Go!" Kayla whipped around. "Holy shit! Oh my God! Oh my God!" We shrieked as we started sprinting the rest of the way, but then I feel my legs start to wobble. "Oh God, please, no! This can't be real! It just can't be!" I thought to myself, somewhat in denial that this was actually happening. Could this really be happening? In that moment, I knew I had one goal, and that was to make it through my front door. We sprint up my driveway. Both of us practically crashed into my front door, frantically turning the doorknob, and then my heart dropped. The door was locked. I'm pounding and pounding on the door, screaming for somebody to please hurry and open the door. I look behind me, and there he is, stepping onto the driveway, still heading straight for us. "Where is everybody? Please, Mom, help us." I glance back behind me, and he's gone. I went silent, listening intently for any noise, when all of a sudden, he slowly came around the side of my house just a few feet away. This means he walked around the left side of my house, through my backyard, and came around the right side of my house. I screamed while practically falling through the door. My mom looked at us like we were insane, and I yelled, "Close the door!" Kayla slammed it shut and looks out the window. "Where is he? Where did he go?" Kayla said, running to look out the front living room windows. "Who? What are you talking about?" my mom said, looking at me completely confused. "Someone was following us. It was someone dressed as Michael Myers." "No, don't!" I yelled as my mom opened the door and stepped outside, peering around the front yard. She stepped out to the driveway. I nervously watched out the screen door. She turned and yelled back to me, "Well, there's no one now. It may have been just someone messing with you." This thought did cross my mind. It is Halloween after all. But to think, a grown man, I'm assuming, is walking around alone messing with 2 young girls, stalking them for so long, is just extremely creepy. I have to say, since I'm older now and have seen the movies at least 1,000,000 times, that stalker guy was 100% spot on with exactly how Michael is in the movies. The walking slowly but gaining on us so fast at the same time. Disappearing and popping up out of nowhere. Like I said, it may as well have been the real Michael Myers. But also the fact that this scenario was my #1 childhood fear, that I've had multiple nightmares about, and even though I'm much older now, reminiscing that night still gives me chills till this day. It's just, I can't help but wonder if it really was actually a prank gone too far, or if that person had more sinister intentions in store for us. This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This bummed my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to still be trick-or-treating, and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over because they still wanted to go trick-or-treating, so that left me home alone with my brother handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 or almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, when there was a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking on our door this late. I assumed that it was just some late-night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we were out of candy or that we weren't home. So I assumed it was my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater because he wasn't wearing a costume and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie, and he also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was going to open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door and was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted to him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you alone in there?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said, "Sounds like you're not alone in there." I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get the fuck away from my house or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't fucking around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole until I saw him completely off of our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. My brother and I were a bit paranoid after this and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now, when I think back to this, I wish we had called the police because maybe we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor had found her lying on her front porch covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we knew. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them, since we hadn't seen many details of his face. They went on the hunt for the man, but never caught him. I blame myself for that poor old lady's murder because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all is the fact that he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her house had been left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since her door was wide open. This means that he just wanted to kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry, he only had the urge to murder. I apologize if there are some errors or things that may not make sense. This is the perspective my story told from me, and a part by a friend. This happened to me the weekend of Halloween, and I personally don't like talking about it, but I've been told by my friend to share it to get it off of my chest. Me and a friend were invited to a house party just for college students in the richer area of the town, so the house was huge with an acre of land and pool area. This party was themed to be a little naughty, so my friend dressed in a sexy nurse outfit, and I dressed as a belly dancer. The majority of the party took place in the house, as there was maybe like 70 people, with the house being very spacious, so not too difficult to get around. I'm not much of a drinker, but I did have some juice that was available. Some friends pulled me and my friend over to take some pics, and I set my drink down. After what felt like an hour of just taking pictures, I found my cup and took another sip, not even worrying that I left my cup alone for a while. Then a man came up to me, who looked to be in his late 20s, early 30s. He said my boyfriend's name and said he's been trying to call me. That's when I realized I didn't have my phone on me. I have loads of respect for my boyfriend. We always make sure to stay in contact with each other, and since he had to work, I promised I would contact him, but I just forgotten. The man said it's urgent and said I can use his phone to call in one of the rooms. So not thinking at all, I followed the man. If my boyfriend really wanted to call me, then I knew it would be something terrible. As we entered the room, I felt as if I just ran a mile and felt winded. The man closed the door behind me and sat me on the bed and gave me his phone. I started to feel more weak, like I just got a migraine and just couldn't call. Then I was helped to lay down, and within seconds, I was out cold. I woke up later, not sure where I was or what even happened. I found my friend rubbing a napkin on my tummy while yelling. It took me a bit to come back to reality, and I realized I was in a bedroom with my friend cleaning some stuff off of me. That's when I had a panic attack and just realized that I quite possibly have been used. My friend calmed me down and told me that didn't happen. She explained that she couldn't find me anywhere and assumed I went to the bathroom. But after like some minutes, I still didn't show. So she went looking for me, eventually checking the bedrooms, and found me laying in bed with the guy something out of my belly button. Apparently, he was playing shots with my unconscious body of sucking alcohol out of my belly button, licking salt from my chest, and kissing my lips. She didn't know how long this went on for, but I immediately felt sick and even coughed up from just the thought. Thankfully, my boyfriend got off of work early after my friend told him what happened. He picked me up while my friend asked around about the guy, but of course no one knew of him or recognized him. I was taken to urgent care and looked at. Thankfully, nothing was wrong with me, and the drug in my drink didn't cause any further harm than just knocking me out. I wish the story ends here, but I started to receive texts from a random guy. At first, he was just asking me random things, and I just didn't reply, but then he showed me a pic of my torso and started saying creepy things to me, and even giving me the impression he's stalking me. This is still going on today, just texting me randomly. I've had the idea to try to bait him one of these days to finally have backup to catch him, but I don't know how smart he can be and what he will do to me if things don't go as planned. Halloween night had always been a thrilling escapade, filled with laughter, spooky costumes, and the prospect of scoring a bag full of sugary treats. That year, the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood as I, a young teenager, set out with my friends. As the night progressed, we wandered through the dimly lit streets, reveling in the festivities. Amidst the costumes and cheerful chatter, a sense of unease began to creep into the air. It was subtle at first, like a whisper of apprehension brushing against my skin. We approached a dimly lit alley, and my friends, unaware of the growing discomfort, turned down it, lured by the promise of a shortcut to the next street. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts urging me to steer clear. A distant memory of a neighborhood meeting about safety echoed in my mind, warning against unlit alleys at night. My caution persuaded me to decline and take the longer route around. I just knew, in the back of my mind, that something did not feel right. Alone now, I walked briskly, my heart pounding slightly faster than usual. My senses were heightened, and every rustle in the bushes made my nerves tingle. As I rounded a corner, a shiver ran down my spine. I turned to glance back, and in the shadows I saw a figure, a tall, looming man wearing a disheveled clown mask. Panic surged through me, and I quickened my pace, my mind racing with thoughts of how to escape this alarming situation. The man began to follow, closing the gap between us with alarming speed. I darted into a nearby store, hoping to lose him in the maze of Halloween decorations and costumed customers. The store was bustling, but the man's relentless pursuit continued. My fear grew, and I knew I needed help. Summoning all my courage, I approached a store employee and explained the situation. They immediately called the police, and within moments, officers arrived at the store. I pointed out the man who was still lingering nearby, and the police apprehended him. Turns out he had a history of attempted kidnappings, and I had narrowly escaped becoming his victim. The sense of relief was overwhelming, and I thanked my instincts for leading me away from danger that Halloween night. This frightening encounter forever altered my perception of Halloween, serving as a chilling reminder that even amidst the festivities, we should always remain vigilant and trust our instincts to keep ourselves safe. Me and 3 of my friends, Beck, Lauren, and Zach, decided to go trick-or-treating this year, and surprisingly, my parents actually let me go with them without their parental supervision. I was stoked, and the 4 of us made plans to go out to a richer neighborhood in the hopes that we get better candy. We didn't. I blame Bob's Burgers. I drove, my parents gave me the keys to the truck, and we all set out at about 6 that night. We left the truck at a park that was relatively central to the area, and from there we weaved through the cul-de-sacs and streets that webbed out from there. At first, we didn't notice the guys following us. There were still a lot of people walking around, and we were seeing the same people around, so there weren't any red flags yet. But as the night wore on and less people were out was when I finally realized that we were being followed. When I finally came to the realization, my friend started noticing I was getting antsy and tried to ask me what was wrong, but in all honesty, I didn't want to freak them out. Beck can't function when she's scared, Lauren would try to confront them and end up getting hurt, and Zach would probably just run away or something. So I said it was nothing, and we kept going. We turned down this one street, and due to my god-awful sense of direction, we were lost. But when I looked behind us, the group was still tailing us, and we went down the street. As we went further along, I finally realized that there were no inhabited houses and everything was in development. It was dark. There was nobody but us, and the group following us. And we were far enough away from the more populated area that, had the group wanted to assault us or something, nobody would have heard. I was freaking out by that point, trying to get us to run, but Lauren stopped us, and by then, the group caught up and had us surrounded. Now let me tell you, these guys, I assume, were creepy. Like not just, oh, it's Halloween, that mask is kinda unsettling creepy. I mean, get the fuck away from me and let me cry creepy. There were 6 of them, all about our age, 16, 17, all wearing designer fucking suits and latex animal masks. The 4 of us were stuck in the middle, surrounded by these guys in animal masks, and there was nothing we could do. Lauren at least had the good sense to pull out her phone to try to call the cops, but her battery is shit and pretty much died the second she turned her screen on. I left my phone in the truck, and Beck and Zach don't have phones. All in all, we were in a really bad situation. But the 6 of them just stood there. They didn't say a word, they didn't move, they just stood there. Beck was crying and clinging to Zach for dear life. Zach couldn't do anything because Beck was attached to him. Lauren was furiously trying to get her phone to turn back on, and I was almost in tears as well. But they still just fucking stood there staring at us and not saying a word. Then I saw that Zach had dropped his metal cane he bought for his costume, and it was right by my foot. I picked it up and did as much as I could with it in that split second. I lunged at the guy closest to me and hit him over the head with it. All I remember is he fell, and we ran. We got to the end of the street, and by some miracle, the next street we ran down lead out to the park. My truck was at the other end of the grads area, so we ran, got back into it, and drove to Lauren's. I don't know what the fuck they were trying to accomplish other than scaring the shit out of us, but in any case, it was the scariest shit that has ever happened to me and my friends, and we will never go back to that place. The whole incident only took about 10 minutes once we got to that street. I know it's kinda early for Halloween stuff, but this happened a few years ago and it still creeps me out sometimes. So this happened back when I was in 7th grade, and I was trick-or-treating with one of my friends in his neighborhood. You should probably know that his neighborhood is divided up into 3 parts. The first part is what I used to call the normal part. This part is just like every other regular neighborhood. The houses are close together without long walking distances in between. The next part was what I called the big part, which was where all the larger houses are. Finally, there is the section that is very spaced out. In this part, there are a few houses here and there, but there are long distances between them. So my friend and I started out at the neighborhood Halloween party and then continued out to the normal part and then the big part. Everything went smoothly and was fairly normal, but then we decided to go to the area with the houses that were very spaced out. We already had a lot of candy, so we weren't planning on staying too long. We went to 2 or 3 houses and everyone was friendly and gave us candy, as usual. But then we went to this one house that had all of its lights on and a bowl of candy outside. It's probably worth mentioning that my friend and I could see a few adults sitting and talking in the living room of the house, or dining room, I don't really remember. Regardless, him and I ran up to the bowl and started shoveling as much candy as we could into our bags. We didn't stop until we heard footsteps in the house, then we booked it. We were just getting out of the driveway of the house when we heard a door open behind us. We started running down a small paved path nearby, and stopped to turn back and look to see if whoever came out of the house had followed us. We saw them in the driveway, walking around, as if looking for something. Him and I decided it was probably a good idea to go back. We assumed that no one would actually follow us down the path just to try to get candy back, so we assumed we were safe. This is the part where things get creepy. As we were walking down the path, my friend and I would occasionally turn around and go, "Oh, look at that. It must be the person from the house." And then we'd run for a few seconds until we got tired of the joke. Obviously, this was fairly normal behavior for a couple of 7th graders hanging out on Halloween night. However, there was one point when my friend turned around and then stopped. I stopped with him. Dude?" I said to him, wondering why we stopped and what he was looking at. "Look over there," he said. "Where?" I asked. He pointed a ways from where we came, a little off the path. "There," he said. "Does that look like a person to you?" I wasn't entirely sure, and I was about to answer when suddenly this humanoid figure started moving. Without warning, both of us took off at the same time and ran all the way back to the Halloween party we came from. Now, I would like to address the fact that this easily could not actually have been a person. It was dark out and we could have been seeing things. After all, we had just been chased away from a house we were stealing candy from. I don't think it was the person whose candy bowl we robbed, because I don't know anyone who would react like that to a couple of kids taking too many pieces of candy. I also would like to say that even if it was a person, it could have been another trick-or-treater or maybe an adult trying to catch up with their kid. But my friend and I weren't sure at the time, so we decided not to take any risks.